Ramesh, and we are pumped up. We've got a full-ish slate of games coming up here this weekend on the men's side to start our season of lacrosse. Obviously, we had the one game last week. Mercer beat Bellarmine, as I predicted, accordingly.
Didn't make that pick.
We're going to have our game to watch of the weekend at the end of things after our interview, so stay tuned for that. We're talking the women's poll. We've got a lot on the slate here today.
Yeah, plus some terrific guests. A couple of contenders, All-American contenders, in goalie Sarah Reznick from Florida and midfielder Sam Handley from Penn. Sam Handley, a tour-time candidate on the men's side. Can't wait to see him back on the field, so we'll chat with him in a bit. But we're going to start with some more news in terms of conference realignment in college lacrosse, and it comes out of the America East, where Stony Brook, we've talked about it, Stony Brook is on its way to the CAA starting next season, but the America East coming out this week saying that means Stony Brook will not be eligible for the America East tournament this year. It's all sports, but it includes lacrosse, which hits us here.
Yeah.
On the women's side, that's taking out the contender in the America East from the tournament.
Yeah, we both picked Stony Brook to win the America East this year. For the men, obviously, that automatic bid is important for them, too.
Huge.
So, like, that's very impactful. Obviously, we know this is going on with JMU and the CAA and their women's side of things. James Madison, who's won the conference the last 4 times they played a tournament, isn't eligible for that. So now we're seeing this happen to another really good team on the women's side, of course, and the men, who is a competitor at the end of the year on a yearly basis.
Especially in a wide-open conference.
In a conference that, like we talked about it, like you don't know who is going to come out on top at the end. And that tournament, the America East tournament, if you haven't seen it, is one of the most fascinating you can find. We've had years where UMBC has come from being under 500 and winning that. So now you remove Stony Brook, it opens things up for teams like Vermont, UMBC, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, kind of doesn't feel right, does it? It's tough, you know, especially for the kids, most importantly.
Yeah, because you talk about the America East tournament, Stony Brook men, like all you got to do is get in that top 4. You win 2 games and you're in. Yep. That is the magic of end of April, early May lacrosse for all of these teams. Really what this comes down to, and this is my number one thing, because people are going at the conference on social media, kind of deservedly so, but at the end of the day, this comes down to the fact that this is supposed to be a deterrent for programs and athletic departments to leave a conference. That clearly is not working, because it's happening over and over and over again that this is not enough of a deterrent to stop schools from taking, whether it's more money, a better situation, greener pastures, whatever, to go elsewhere. So all this is affecting is the student athletes. Can we all, as presidents of these universities that are part of making these bylaws for these conferences in terms of what happens if you're leaving, can we just get rid of this? Because it's not affecting the athletic departments and it's not stopping them from leaving. Put a bigger financial penalty, whatever you want to do, but stop hurting the student athletes here. So this isn't a conference thing. You can't yell at the America East for this or the CAA, because it's been put in before.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of it in all these things, because we know the people are going to leave. And like, it's pretty clear that unless the financial implication is that large, that it's not going to, none of this is stopping them. So let's stop hurting the student athletes here and letting them take the bear of this and let them compete in these conference tournaments. Take that thing out of the bylaws for these conferences and figure something else out, because it's clearly not working.
Yeah, and I mean, even from the conference perspective, do a better job at keeping teams in your conference. Make your conference attractive enough for people who don't want to leave. Like, I understand that might be a little easier said than done, but that's also a factor. You have to do a preventative measure before this reaction to everything else, where you think you're trying to prevent things, but like we said, it hasn't really moved the needle at all when it comes to trying to prevent people from leaving, or even those ramifications don't have much of an impact after just the impact on the student athlete.
Because the athletic director, the presidents who are making these decisions to leave, like, they can't, well, yes, they're trying to consider the people that are there now. They're thinking about long-term things for their institution, and that is their job. So, like, it's clear that the student athletes on campus now don't matter in these situations.
No,
because they're,
from their perspective, they're
just a byproduct of the situation, and that's not fair to the people who are there.
So what's the solution, I guess, in the meantime? Like, what do you do if you're the Stony Brook men and women? The women, of course, we know, play a very difficult schedule on a yearly basis at Syracuse, at Florida, at Northwestern. They take on Johns Hopkins. They play at Princeton as well. So their non-conference schedule is good enough where they can get an at-large bid.
Yep.
So they don't need their automatic qualifier necessarily if they perform well to get in. The men, on the other hand, they play against Rutgers, at Brown, against Syracuse. So now
Syracuse at home this year.
Yes, that's true.
That actually is a nice added game
to
look at.
My thought is, and I don't know how locked in any of this is anymore, can you replace some America East opponents with maybe if a date matches up with someone with a better RPI, someone with a higher pedigree that's like looking for a game on a weekend, I don't know when, between now and the end of the season. Can you replace your America East opponent?
To stop you?
Who is going to stop you? Can you do that? I don't know if that's something in the minds of the Stony Brook side of things, but that could be an alternative here to try and say, okay, well, we can't get in by automatic qualifier, especially for the men. Let's try and swap out some of these games to get our prestige up there and get ourselves in a tournament, and at least in that scenario, if we perform well. Give ourselves a chance.
It's a very valid point because the conference isn't doing anything for you now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on your way out.
Those games don't matter. Right? Your conference games do not matter this year.
Yeah, for sure. I will say that I hope, especially in terms of Stony Brook women and JMU, I hope that the selection committee looks at it. If they indeed do win the regular season titles in these leagues, I do hope that they get the benefit of the doubt when you look at them possibly getting in the tournament. I think Stony Brook for the men's side, if they go undefeated and win maybe a big non-conference game, I hope they get a benefit of the doubt too. Because at the end of the day, like, to have that ripped away, that is just brutal. And for a team that maybe is supposed to be there, I do hope there maybe is a benefit of the doubt for some of these programs. If they're on the edge, give them an opportunity.
Or what if Stony Brook and JMU just played each other every single week instead of their conference games? I would sign up for that. Do a series.
It would be a pretty entertaining series.
It'd be fascinating.
It'd be great.
I know it would never happen, but I'm like, wow, just replacing.
Maybe they can replace some games in the middle.
It'd be a lot of fun.
It'd be interesting.
Get together, guys. Make the best of it. But yeah, we hope the best for these athletes, and hopefully things can
just take it out of the bylaws. It's not stopping anybody.
All right, let's move on. The women's poll, the IL Media / coaches poll now for the women's side of things. IL women changing things up a bit. Top 25, and Boston College, of course, number 1. North Carolina, number 2. So on and so forth. You take a look at it right there. And what is the most and the biggest surprise for you, Travis, when taking a look at this poll?
Well, for me is when you have a household name like Maryland at number 9. I mean, that is really low. Look, the Terps didn't make the Final Four last year, but still was a very competitive team in the Big Ten. And it's Maryland. And have you seen the talent they continue to bring in terms of the recruiting classes, what they have coming back? I mean, it was a really young team last year. I think the only Big Ten schedule was weird. Like, there was a lot about last year that wasn't normal in terms of Maryland. But, like, you look at what they have coming back. They've got 8 of their 12 starters back. You hit on it when you're talking about them as a potential team to win the Big Ten over Northwestern, who's ranked higher. You add in Aurora accordingly coming over from Hopkins. Abby Bosco on defense transferring in from Penn. I mean, they've got top recruits coming in every single year, Under Armour All-Americans, just refueling this roster. There is no way that roster is the 9th ranked team in the country.
No.
I'm sorry. There's just no way. I mean, USA Lacrosse Magazine had them up, I think, at 6th in the preseason. That feels a little bit more right, like the 5 to 7 variety, but 9, like closer to 10, just doesn't. It just doesn't feel right. I had them, I believe, in 7th in my poll.
Yeah, I think you could bump them up above Duke at the very least. Like, I know Duke has got a good thing going on there chemistry-wise, and with what they have coming back, or I mean, even there's a couple more spots they could be up higher. I mean, 1 year Maryland had in which they weren't in the championship weekend for the first time in forever, and you have a coach in Kathy Reese, and you have this tradition. I would have thought that the tradition would have made a little bit more of an impact when it came to the rankings. I mean, I'm surprised, maybe considering all that, they weren't like, people are like, okay, Maryland's going to be back, top 5, let's do this, I mean,
that actually is maybe one of the bigger surprises. Also, like, consider this. So if they're at 9, and you've got people like myself who probably put them somewhere 5, 6, 7, it means you have people that voted them likely out of the top 10.
That's right.
Which is maybe the most shocking thing of all. Like, Maryland, yeah, they've got some things to prove this year after last year, but it's Maryland. Like, this team's going to be back. They're going to be contending for a Big Ten title, and they are going to be contending for the Final Four. You just can almost bank on it.
You have banked on it. almost every single year
And
for the past decade or so.
I don't think this is any different.
It's not going to be that much different. It's just because of one year, which was a weird year at that. I don't understand.
It would be a bigger surprise.
I agree with you.
It would be a bigger surprise to me if they finish outside the top 8 teams of the country this year than if they finish inside them, which is why they should be in the top 8.
Yeah, I think you're right, for sure. My surprise is the fact that I understand Boston College being number 1 after last year and Charlotte North, so on and so forth. You win the championship. But North Carolina only got 2 first-place votes. I really thought it would be more split.
Yeah.
You look at last year, and the better team over the course of the regular season, the better team all year long, was North Carolina. They had a better roster, and Boston College got blown out in 2 games last season over the course of the regular season. And North Carolina lost 1 game by 1 goal to Boston College. And I don't understand how you can look at what North Carolina has coming in this year, and they lose Katie Hogue and a few other pieces, but not a lot, not enough to say, oh, you know, they're really not gonna do the same thing they did last year. I think they could do the same exact thing they did a year ago, North Carolina. We'll do our women's preview for the ACC in a moment, and I'll touch on it more then. But with Olivia Dirks coming in, and don't forget, North Carolina has still Caitlin Wurzberger on the team, who was the top recruit in the country, and she came in as the biggest ballyhooed #1 recruit ever in women's lacrosse. And she's coming in for a sophomore year, which she played pretty well, maybe was a little overshadowed by the talent on North Carolina for a year, and now she gets a chance to step up. It just feels like people forget so quickly about some of these recruits and what they can do and the impact they make, and all of a sudden Mallory Hasselbeck deserves all the credit in the world, but she hasn't done it yet. And she's going into a roster like Caitlin Wurzberger was last year.
I think the most incredible thing is, like, even she isn't getting the name hype because of, like, we have a backlog of talent in the college game, period, because the COVID year and everybody getting 5th years and having the opportunity to continue to play. But you're right. It is really easy to forget that, like, Caitlin Wurzberger stepped in on campus on maybe the most talented team of the country and was a contributor right away.
Right, as a freshman. And,
those opportunities are only getting increased for her. So, like, when you're on a team like that, you're not getting the volume of shots that maybe a #1 recruit would somewhere else. It's the same thing with Brendan O'Neill on the men's side. Like, he was great last year, but he was able to pick and choose his spots because you have Michael Sowers and Joe Robertson, like all these pieces. And now, like, the opportunities, they're only going to get bigger, and you're going to remember why these people were the #1 recruits in the country coming in.
I mean, I get it with Charlotte North, but Jamie Ortega could have every bit of this season Charlotte North had last year at North Carolina.
You're right.
There's no reason not to believe that.
Really
Charlotte North is amazing. I think Jamie Ortega has just as high of a ceiling as Charlotte North did last year and can do the exact same thing.
We talked about it before. North Carolina has, like, 3 Tewaaraton finalists on the roster.
Yeah,
maybe more.
I know. They do. Emma Trenchard and Taylor Moreno in the back end.
Yeah.
And I know Rachel Hall is great for Boston College. She didn't have as good of a regular season as Taylor Moreno last year. And Rachel Hall was great in the tournament. I understand they beat them 11-10 in that semifinal. That goes you play 10 of those games that they split at 5-5.
They won 2 of the 3.
It should be split. I understand if you pick Boston College on their
Carolina won the season series.
They did. I know.
Against them.
And they blew them out in the regular season.
You're right.
And I know it's a different year, but at the same time, I feel like North Carolina deserves more than 2 first-place votes.
I was actually very surprised.
Yeah.
I did not vote North Carolina as the #1 team.
Fine.
But I know, but I thought about it, and I was surprised there weren't more people that did.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, speaking of the ACC,
that was
really heated.
We were really
we're
heated about
stay
this
in the
poll.
ACC,
Look at us.
and I think we're going to disagree again. We're going to start on the men's side.
Okay.
On who we have as our preseason favorite in the conference. Who do you like?
I am going with Duke. And it's interesting in the ACC because every team's got a guy, right? Every team's got, Duke's got Brennan O'Neill. You have Chris Gray with North Carolina. You have Kevin Aub with Notre Dame. Syracuse had Owen Hiltz, and that sort of drops them down with Owen Hiltz. He was going to make a big, I think I was a believer he was going to be a big step. And Dordovic, you're correct as well there. So you had everybody, and Virginia with Connor Schellenberger, just want to make sure you include them as well. And so everyone's got a guy. So then you have to look past those guys, right? Because they all sort of cancel each other out at the end of the day. And I think Duke, their makeup and their depth, as you said, will this year, I think, put them over the top when it comes to this conference. Virginia, Yeah, they've got depth, they have the experience, but they have a little bit different of a makeup than they did a year ago. And you're losing guys like Ian Laviano, like Dox Aiken, Jared Connors, Alex Rode. And yeah, there's guys that are very talented that are taking those spots. There's guys that are still there that are going to be in the same spots they were a year ago. But that changes the chemistry of your team a little bit.
You're right.
And we've seen with Virginia over the course of a regular season, they take time to sort of get to know each other. And last year maybe wasn't as big of an impact because they had played together and known each other. They had a lot of guys back. I feel like, yeah, Virginia could be the team at the end of the year that, once again, we're seeing in championship weekend. But I think Duke, with the fact that last year was a little funky for them, with Michael Sowers, obviously an outstanding athlete, but, you know, you bring in some of these new faces and it's a little different. I think Duke, with Brendan O'Neill and Nakai Montgomery, Tyler Carpenter on the back end, Kenny Brower, Mike Adler, I think that they've got now a nucleus that will play together earlier in the season. I know February Duke is what it is, but over the course of an ACC schedule, I see Duke being able to outlast the rest.
The fascinating thing about this conference is that Virginia won the national championship last year. They went 2-4 in the ACC last season.
Yeah.
They were under 500.
Right. You can't count them on them in the regular season. And postseason, I mean, they're great.
I mean, how many other conferences in any sport in the entire country does the national champion have an under 500 record in conference? It just doesn't happen. So that it tells you, first of all, everything you need to know about trying to pick who's going to be the champion here.
Yeah. I mean, three of the four championship teams, championship weekend teams, were from the ACC. That's all you need to know.
It's ridiculous. So I like the Duke pick, and Duke is maybe my team is the most talented roster in the ACC, but I am going to give a slight edge to Virginia. I do think, when you look at guys, and you mentioned some of the guys that everybody has, Connor Schellenberger obviously kind of took that kind of mantle last year for Virginia and what he did down the stretch in championship weekend. But I think it's really easy to forget that Matt Moore is really, really good. So in my estimation, not only does Virginia have one guy, but you got two guys. And I mean, like, it was a couple of years ago that Matt Moore was the guy that all of a sudden broke out in the NCAA tournament, and you're looking as a possible tour-time contender. I think you have Schellenberger and Moore, who are both guys that at the end of the year, if either one of them is a tour-time finalist, I'm not surprised. And that, I think, is the difference maker for me, for Virginia. I also really like their defense. Like, I think it was the Jurassic Park references with their size and length down the stretch of the season was huge. Well, Cole Kastner obviously got a lot of the praise. Another year for him just to learn the sport, which I think is huge. And Cade Sostad is an incredible athlete. And
yeah, Lars Tiffany on Cade Sostad, like, his jaw drops sometimes.
Yeah.
He talks about his athleticism like it's a different world.
And remember, 2020 didn't play because he was injured, and then he had been beat up at different times. Like, him healthy at that position, like, remember, as a freshman, he stepped in on that team and helped them win a national championship as a guy at times was having to take #1 offensive players out of the mix. So he is a really, really good athlete coming out of Texas. So I like all those different pieces. You could go with any one of maybe, I think Syracuse, the only team that somebody would say, yeah, I'm not sure if they're the team that I would pick in the preseason as my best team in the ACC. They could turn into it depending on how things turn out, but maybe not the one team. Otherwise, I think the other four are all valid teams to pick.
I mean, a question mark for Virginia is also the goalie. I mean,
you got to
true
figure out what
freshman, and Matthew Nunes in there. I think that obviously he could be amazing. He could be really good.
We saw it happen with Carolina a couple years ago. They stumbled into their guy.
It is hard to, though, count on a freshman goalie to really be able to get you those stops when you need to in a conference as good as this one. I mean, Griffin Schutz is another, the top recruit going to Virginia. Duke has 3 of the top 10 in that Power 100. So, you know, Andrew McAdory is from Duke. He could be another one of those, you know, not playing second fiddle to Brendan O'Neill, but they know each other really well and could work together at a very high level. So I think some of these newcomers could also certainly make a difference. I mean, we talk about North Carolina. I mean, you have to mention them with Chris Gray. You lose your whole midfield. There's a lot that you have to figure out there to be able to get that production you did a year ago. It's going to be hard to score those 15, 16 goals. We fought the North Carolina highlight show. They're going to have to win a little bit differently this year, so it's going to be tougher for them, I think, to adjust.
I will say, too, the goalie thing, playing this conference, if it's anything like what we've seen the last couple of years, it takes an adjustment just knowing how many goals you're probably going to let up.
Yeah.
Like mentally knowing, hey, you know what? I could give up 12 goals, 13 goals, 14 goals, and we still win. And that's going to be okay if my save percentage is like 55% and I stop a little over half, but we win. Like that mentally as a goalie, that's a transition from the high school game.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss, like we have to mention Notre Dame because sometimes they go under the radar. They have Kevin on. They sort of get lost in the shuffle, I guess.
You know what they're going to have defensively.
We know what they can have defensively. Their short stick D middies were probably some of the best in the country last year. And they bring in Wheat and Jacobois as well, back again.
Yep.
I don't really know what to expect from Notre Dame, but I feel like
is a really good goalie.
They have as high of a ceiling as anybody. They lost a couple guys in the defensive end. They lose their face-off guys as well, but it feels like they are also poised to make that next step in maybe a different way than the rest.
I mean, they very well could have been rounded out the Final Four as 4 ACC teams. I mean, they weren't far from beating Maryland last year in the quarterfinals.
14-13 in overtime against Maryland.
Like,
so they were that close too.
Final Four.
And they go a little bit under the radar because of a lot of the flash you see from these other programs. Gary Gate coming into Syracuse. We know that's going to make a difference for them too. But look for Notre Dame maybe to pick off some of the. I mean, I think North Carolina, Syracuse, and at the end of the day, what was the other team? Virginia could all be vulnerable in the regular season. So, I mean, Notre Dame could win 3 of those games, and all of a sudden, look, I mean, they're in the top 5 in the country.
I mean, at the end of the day, the winner of this conference is not going to be undefeated. Okay. I'm making that prediction.
Okay.
Now. Whoever wins, no one is running the table in the ACC.
Okay, that's fair.
There's just no way. All right, let's go to the women's side.
I mean, you picked Boston College #1 in the poll.
I did.
Are you picking them to win the conference? Is that
it's a really hard question because it's the same thing on the men's side.
Yeah.
Virginia's was my #1. I stuck with Virginia, so I'm going to do the same thing here on the women's side.
That's fine.
I'm going to go with Boston College. We talk about how talented this team is and all they have coming back. Charlotte North, obviously. I mean, do we need to talk about Charlotte North anymore with all that she's accomplished and done? She is the best player in the country right now going into the season. But, like, you go up and down this roster, and you almost forget, like, the talent that they have because, like, everything, because of all that Charlotte North did and all the accolades that she deservedly got. But Jen Medjid had a really good close to last year in terms of the NCAA tournament down the stretch. Rachel Hall obviously really came on strong in the NCAA tournament. If she can carry over what she did in the tournament to the regular season, that is going to be trouble for the rest of the conference. And then, like, don't forget, Belle Smith, as a young player, very well may be the makings of that next star at BC in terms of who, like, when Charlotte North leaves, who's going to be that next superstar to come up through the ranks? Don't forget about her. And we talked about #1 overall recruits. Mallory Hasselbeck now joins her sister, who had some ridiculous highlight reel goals, Annabelle, last year. And now, so Mallory is at BC, and she's the #1 incoming recruit. You know that Acacia Walker-Weinstein is going to find ways to get her on the field. So, I mean, they have a ton of depth. They've got a ton of talent. I'm going to go with them as my preseason pick in the conference, though North Carolina has and Syracuse both have, I mean, you're looking at maybe the top 3 teams in the country.
The thing that I think can put Boston College over the top, and you mentioned all those athletes, fantastic, is the defense. And I remember talking to Acacia Walker Weinstein after the tournament, and it was that defense, that young core, Holly Schleicher, Sydney Scales, Hunter Roman, had sort of just figured their way out through the regular season and then peaked at the postseason, just like Rachel Hall did at the right time. And you could see her eyes light up, Acacia, when she talked about these defenders on this team, because there's something about them in this group, and they're back together again. So Boston College, if they're going to go on a pretty intense run here, that's going to be, to me, the reason why. Because those other people you talked about are great. They sort of match up with the rest of team like a North Carolina, if you will, or even a Syracuse at the end of the day.
You know what? And one of the difference makers for North Carolina talent-wise has been the fact that they've had maybe the best goalie in the country and the best defender in the country to back-end things. So, like, all the talent you have offensively, and then you don't let – I mean, how many times in a couple of the North Carolina-Syracuse games this past year did you watch that game and Syracuse is hanging tough, going goal for goal with North Carolina, and then all of a sudden the goal for goal stops? Yeah. Because, like, having to go up against that defense over and over and over again, you just can't keep up. Yeah. And that's how Boston College wants to be this year, that you can't keep up matching them goal for goal because their defense stops you.
Down the stretch last year, they held Syracuse, Notre Dame, and North Carolina all to 10 goals apiece in the NCAA tournament,
Really
which
impressive.
is really, really good. So that is something to watch out for Boston College. I'm picking North Carolina. You might have imagined that from our conversation earlier. They speak because of what they did last year and what they sort of rebooted with this year. You lose Katie Hogue. That's going to hurt for sure. But like I said, Caitlin Wurzberger is ready to take that next step. I think that she's getting forgotten about a little bit here, playing alongside Jamie Ortega. That's going to be so impactful. And then Olivia Dirks coming in out of the midfield from Penn State. I mean, in and of itself would be huge for any program. It just adds to the depth of North Carolina. And then that second tier of Scotty Rose Growney, Taylor Waramy, and Andy Aldave, another transfer as well. It feels like the North Carolina depth continues to recycle forward. So I feel like they have the talent and once again are going to be there at the end. And they know the feeling, and they have that bitterness in them.
Yeah.
They probably feel like we were one goal away from maybe a championship. So I like North Carolina. I was maybe inching a little towards Syracuse until the Emma Ward injury, unfortunately, because I loved getting Emily Harashuk back, as we talked about a week ago. And Emma Ward, I thought, down the stretch for Syracuse, made that offense go. No one in women's lacrosse, I think, went downhill better than Emma Ward down the stretch last year. And within that Gary Gate offense, now it's Kayla Trainer's offense. I just think that Syracuse, with what they had coming back, Megan Carney, Emily Harashuk, Emma Ward, looked really dangerous. They have a couple good goalie transfers as well that can fill that void. But it is North Carolina. But those three at the top, it doesn't get much better than that.
No, I mean, by far the best women's conference in the country.
Yeah, as usual.
Yeah,
I mean, on a yearly basis.
Not a surprise.
And with some of the transfers coming in from other conferences, there's even more, it feels like, of a separation a bit.
Good luck to Pitt. Welcome to the ACC.
Hey, they could be they could be sneaky and knock some teams off.
But like, if you're Pitt, wouldn't you rather play somewhere else? Like, get your feet wet? And they're thrown right into the deep end. Good luck.
That's a good way to develop a program.
That's
you got to see what the greatness looks like.
Sink or swim right away. See what
Emily Boissonneau knows what she's doing too. So that's the cool thing about the ACC. You've had these programs at the top, but don't forget, Boston College not too long ago was one of those programs trying to find their way and quickly ascended to the top of the conference.
If you do it right, you hire the right people, it can be a quick transition at a great institutions that the ACC has. Speaking of a place with great institutions, we're going to go to the Ivy League to chat with Penn's Sam Handley. So, Sam Handley from Penn joining us now. Sam, we were joking before we got on. How good does it feel to be back on the field?
It's pretty awesome.
I mean, you have last year taken it away, essentially. You guys aren't really able to compete. You played the one game. Walk me through like what that's like in your mind.
This is, I guess, my sophomore season, so I still feel young. I think last year was just great for guys like Adam Goldner and JoJo Biddle to have one more, final run, and especially for Adam to break our goals record and single goals record was just really special and awesome to be a part of.
I mean, how much, like you said you feel young, but you've been around the program for a few years. I guess how much has the group changed, in the last few years since you last took the field as a team?
Well, guys like Simon Matthias, Noah Lamb, and Tyler Dunn are, 4 years into the workforce now or whatever it is. I'm sure Tyler Dunn is soon to be getting married. It's different, a little different. I'm sure, there's a lot of the core guys who are still around from my freshman and sophomore academic years. But, the senior class has been really special, and I'm just thankful to be a part, with them. And so guys like BJ Farrar, Piper Bond, Dylan Gergar, Caleb Fernandez, all back. So
how has your role changed since then?
Definitely feel old. Feel like an academic senior, but an athletic sophomore. Just seeing these freshmen come in, it feels good knowing that I was once in their shoes, and it's definitely just been super rewarding just to see their progress throughout the year.
Tell you what, could be worse things to be there at Penn with a couple more years there under your belt to go through the Wharton School, right? Like you just keep doing what you're doing, and you're in the best spot you can be.
It's it's not too bad.
And where, like you individually, like where's your game at compared to the last time we saw you?
I think I'm bigger and faster. I think just having the comfort of being around this program for 3 years, you kind of can walk out of the locker room with a little more confidence just because you've been there before. And also just being old, young guys are looking at you, so you kind of have to hold that, upon yourself too.
What was the biggest challenge of the last couple of years for you? And was it, obviously the injury, you said you could have come back, but for you, what was the biggest thing that maybe you had to overcome?
It's a tough question. There are a lot of things thrown our way. I think just kind of being kept in the dark by Penn last year was something that I wasn't ready for. So I think that just being kept in the dark for so long and then getting the rug ripped out right before our season, potential season, was probably the hardest.
For you, you stepped on campus and it was like a shot out of a cannon your freshman year. You got obviously propelled right there to the precipice of being in the Final Four. You challenged Yale in the Ivy League. It was an incredible season for you guys. And then you have kind of the bump in the road there in 2020 for you health-wise, and then the season shuts down. So, what, in terms of, your game and your confidence, how do you still build off of that 2019 season, knowing, what you accomplished? Do you almost feel like it's a start from scratch now? How do you deal with that as you enter the season?
I think I've been getting a lot of attention and hype and sort of the in the lacrosse world lately, and I guess that's nice to bear the sort of fruits of my labor. But honestly, I haven't not played in 3 years. I feel like that's just a chip enough on the shoulder. So
yeah, and a school at Penn in which you guys always play a very tough schedule to start the year. Do you feel like things are going to be on display pretty quickly? It's sort of throwing you right back into the fire, right?
I mean, yeah, it feels great. I mean, we can't wait to get out there. And,
yeah, I mean, nothing like playing a couple of big games to say oh, hey, we're back, right?
Definitely. I know. I feel like that, that when I get that first hit and get put on the ground, I'm gonna feel a little wake up and then feel pretty happy too.
So you're a Portland guy and an Oregon guy, and I was reading an article and somebody did a Q&A with you for the Penn newspaper, and you said your dream job is to one day own the Portland Trailblazers. How big of an NBA fan are you?
I think that's that's kind of a stretch. I mean,
yeah, it's a big dream, but hey, you might as well shoot for it.
That's true. I'm definitely a big basketball fan. Growing up, it was my other sport that I loved to play. So yeah, still got a bunch of friends, that play college basketball, and I love to still watch and follow.
So the Trailblazers are your team? Is Dame your guy?
Dame's my guy.
It's a very specific goal, I would say.
It was what would be your dream job in an ideal world? So
what's second on the list?
What's second on the list?
Yeah.
I think living somewhere warm.
Okay. Okay.
That's kind of a drastic step, but yeah, living somewhere warm would be cool.
I'd imagine, from where you started, but there's got to be some cool spots. What's Crater Lake up in Oregon? In terms of your experience around the country, is there a destination or place you've driven through in your time that you look around and you're like, wow, this is pretty sweet?
I think the Montanas and Wyomings are really, really gorgeous, and I've been up in there and have loved my time. So one of those two places. You
got to get in on Yellowstone. That's the
yeah.
Montana. Are you in on it?
Oh yeah, I'm a fan of the show.
Well, who's your favorite character?
I got to go with Casey. Guy's just all around good guy, also kind of a badass. So
he's also a bit of a wild card. You just kind of never know what you're going to get with him.
Definitely. I think just the way he takes everything so personally and upon himself is pretty admirable. So, and then of course John Dutton's quotes, and I love. So
that Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Isn't Tim McGraw on that? I've never seen. Is Tim McGraw on that show?
He co-produced, or he's co-producing a spin-off of the show.
Okay.
Yeah, 1883. Another one I just started. I haven't really gotten too deep into it, but yeah, Yellowstone is just the freaking best.
So are you a cow? You want to be like a cowboy now, Sam? Should we calling you the cowboy? What are we going with here?
I mean, I think I think I had the nickname Paul Bunyan when I was a freshman, so I might as well go to the Cowboy now, I guess.
Yeah,
That
you were the
works.
Paul Bunyan of college lacrosse. I forgot about that one. It's been a couple years. So yeah, hey, there you go.
I forgot you were called that. You're right. It's been a long time.
It has. I didn't forget.
That's good.
And in all seriousness, Sam, because we've been talking about like perspective and stuff, and I know you in that same article you were mentioning your younger brother and what a kind of role model he is for you. I wonder, how does he help bring some perspective through everything that has gone on over the last couple of years?
I think last year I spent a lot of time being mad at things that I couldn't really control, and just to like see the things that he has to go through every day, and it's a constant reminder to me that I'm extremely lucky to be where I am. So it's humbling, it's perspective giving. So, it's I've been able to keep a good head on my shoulders with knowing what he has to go through.
How does that impact like your mentality on the field? Like, you know what I mean?
When he's up in the stands, it's pretty cool to see that he's there supporting me. So I think, motivation and just also perspective too. Like, when times get tough, it's nice to sort of lean on my experience with him. So yeah.
Yeah, my wife has a younger cousin who has special needs, and when we are with her, there is nobody who loves life more and is like more excited to be with you. And I tell you what, it's a perspective that sometimes really it really hits you hard. So I can only imagine what it's like for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and like family's always been big for you. Like your grandpa introduced you to the sport, and like that obviously seems like a big backbone for you, and something sounds like you've leaned on a little bit here through some of these times in the last couple of years.
For sure. I mean, when you get put in your house under quarantine for 6 months, that's all you got.
What you do? Did you lift? Did you watch? Like you probably watched some Shaparian's Yellowstone, but
Exactly. We rewatched Game of Thrones. Spent a lot of time golfing. Just trying to stay in shape. I spent the summer in Los Angeles, which was great. But yeah, playing a lot of golf, being with my friends, taking trips, just trying to be young while I still can.
It's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Well, hey, Sam, I know you're pumped. We're pumped to see this team back on the field. We can't wait to see you guys. Good luck as you get ready, and we'll talk sometime here down the road.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And so Sarah Reznick joins us now, the Florida redshirt sophomore goalie. She's also a preseason All-American. She's from Long Beach, New York, but down in Florida, how warm is it today, Sarah?
83 degrees and blue skies.
Little bragging rights for everybody back home, right? New York?
Yep.
Yeah, February lacrosse in Gainesville is a little different than what most of the country deals with.
Yes, definitely.
For you, Tom said redshirt sophomore, but you've been in college for 3 years. Like, what does it feel like? This is just normal? I mean, it's like you've only really played one full season, but you've been there. It feels like probably forever.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like a very long time, but it's just like, I feel like it's just part of my everyday routine at this point. Like, I don't really think much into it. I'm just like, yeah, just every day is something different, so. It doesn't feel too bad, but
how did all that like time prepare you, for that first full season last year? Obviously, you played outstanding. The expectations are high going into this year as well. How did all of that sort of, the time you spent and getting some learning as you went along, how did that get you ready for when the lights were shining?
I mean, I had my whole first freshman year. I redshirt just because I was playing behind Haley Hicklin, so they wanted me to have that year. They just felt like, they wanted to use me for a full 4 years, so they had me redshirt. And so I already had that season behind me where I was able to learn from her and from all the seniors that were ahead of me and how our culture works and how the program works and all that stuff. So I already went into my original sophomore year, like knowing how everything was supposed to be. And then obviously we had COVID came, and like after that I was able to still have almost a full year of like playing lacrosse here and learning from like all the veterans and everything. So going into the season last year, I kind of already like knew what the deal was and like knew what how everything worked and everything. So I think now going into this year, I don't want to say like I'm an expert on how everything works, but it's like I'm a real senior. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had three freshman years. Not many people get to say that, so that's pretty cool. Hey, you mentioned playing behind Haley. I wonder what that experience was like and how it really set you up for success. Because obviously she had success there, and then you kind of get the opportunity. It's like the Patrick Mahomes thing. You sit back, you can kind of like ease your way in and know, all right, when it's my time, like this is what I want to do.
Yeah, no, exactly. I feel like I learned a lot of leadership from her, and I also learned a lot, like just being like standing from the sideline and just like learning how, just like different it is to be like in that spot, and like I just like looked up to like all the seniors and like saw how hard they played, and like even though I didn't play in the games, I was still competing in practice and everything, so I was still able to stay up with the competition and everything. So, that's pretty much it was like. I learned a lot of different things being on the sideline, but
from coming from a hotbed like Long Island and down to Florida, I guess, obviously a huge football school and everything like that. What was the transition like for you? What were some of the biggest differences you've encountered since playing in lacrosse down in a state like Florida? Obviously, we know the game's growing there, but not probably the same as what you experienced in Long Island.
I don't think it was much different. I didn't really feel much of a transition. I feel like for that though, I played with like a ton of girls from Long Island and Maryland, which are all the same girls that I've played with growing up. So it wasn't like a complete transition. I would say the culture down here is a little different, just like being in that football atmosphere. Like I've never really been a part of that. I feel like lacrosse was such a hotbed, and on Long Island, it wasn't necessarily too much football. So I had to transition to that. And I even still have some girls come to our games that have never heard of the sport of lacrosse. So it's still like growing down here, but it's awesome to be a part of.
You look at this year's team, and you guys have high expectations as you normally do, but there are a bunch of different names up and down the roster because you graduated a lot from last year's team. So is it similar or different in the locker room? Like, what has changed in there with kind of a new mix of players stepping into new roles?
I mean, yeah, obviously we did lose a few seniors last year, and they were really big pieces of the team for the past couple of years, but I wouldn't say much has changed in the locker room. I still think we all have the same mindset. We still have that winning. We're getting to the Final Four weekend, and we're all really competing with each other. So it's pretty much been the same, and I definitely there's some spots to fill, but I think that we're doing a really great job at practice, keeping up the energy, keeping up the competitiveness and everything. So I don't think any of those young girls are afraid to come out this year and compete at all.
Down the stretch last year in an NCAA tournament, we saw, of course, Rachel Hall had an outstanding, run there for a while. And a lot was made of just her style and how unique, a lot of body saves she was making. You saw her get out of the cage athletically, too. And, a few years before, Megan Taylor, a different style, but still so successful. How would you describe your style? It feels like every goalie has a different niche that they sort of find.
I would say that I kind of play like a hockey goalie. I have like very quick hands, so I tend to rely on my hands a lot. But once I got to the college level, obviously the pace picked up a little bit. My hands were still like very fast, but I started to like figure out how to use my body a little more and like get behind the shots more. So sometimes I'll literally find myself on my knees and I'm reaching for a shot that's high. Like, so I say I'd play very quick and like a hockey goalie.
We talk about goalies and what you guys and girls do in the net. Like, I don't know how you step in front of one of those balls and it comes as fast as it's being shot. And like, I don't want anything to do with that. What was originally your mindset? What was it that originally drew you to being in the crease and then making this like what you would do throughout your high school, college, and probably hopefully after that career?
So it was actually a funny story. It was actually, I was in 3rd grade and I just started playing lacrosse. Like I've actually didn't even know what the sport of lacrosse was until I was like 9 years old. Cause I came from New Jersey. So it was like big softball there. So like my dad just automatically thought he was going to put me in softball. So he put me in lacrosse. And then like we were home one night and he's like, hey, I want you to try playing goalie, but I also played soccer. And he was talking about soccer goalie. Like he wanted me to try that, whatever, at practice the next day. And so I went to lacrosse practice the next day, not really thinking anything of it. And I was like, oh, I'll try goalie. And, I ended up not being afraid of the ball, which is a little weird, but I was the only one that wasn't afraid of the ball. So my coach was like, well, she has to be the goalie then. And my dad was like, you know what? Like, if you're going to be the goalie, you have to be good at it because otherwise you're going to get pelted with the ball. So, so we just started going out every day and practicing, and I eventually just kind of got the hang of it. So I just kept with it.
That is an interesting aspect of being a goalie. You have to be good at it in order to not get hit with the ball. That's a great concept, right?
Kind of. Yeah, well, it's kind of false. I still get hit with the ball.
Right. You still have
no
to
matter
make
how
those saves.
good you are.
That's great. I think I saw you guys built a gym with your father in your basement either over the pandemic, you know, when it was the quarantine section and everything. You know, what went into that? And what you brought up your father, you know, that relationship seems pretty tight. You know, what's he meant to you in your career?
Yeah, no. So during quarantine, we kind of, when we got home and like I got back to New York and I realized it was kind of scary up there and everything closed down. My dad and I started running outside like every day. Like we would just make it a thing. We were like, all right, we're just gonna run. We ran like, it was 3 miles or something. We ran to like the end of the boardwalk and back. And originally it was for his like rehabbing his knee because he had meniscus surgery last year. And so we were like, you know what, we cannot do this running anymore. Like, we're getting sick of running every day. So I was like, you know what, Dad, we should turn our garage into a gym. And like, I was kind of joking at first, but then he was like, no, you know what, that's what I'm going to do during my time in quarantine. So he literally like cleaned out the entire garage and then got like super into it. Now we have like a full, like a lot of equipment in there. Like it is a full gym. So,
wow.
Yeah, no, it's definitely really cool.
There are a lot of home gym setups going on throughout the last couple of years. It's just been a great way to improve everybody's home gym.
Yep, and we call it Eagles country because we're huge Philadelphia Eagles fans.
Oh, there we go.
Boy.
You walked right into my wheelhouse. This is amazing.
Here we go.
And you grew up in like Giants and Jets country, and so you could probably pretty much your whole life just rub it in everybody else's faces that the Giants were struggling, right?
Yup, and then when we won the Super Bowl, I wore my Eagles sweatshirt and hat right to school the next day.
This is perfect.
A lot of pride,
you know what?
man.
Sarah Reznick maybe just became my favorite player in all of women's college lacrosse. This is great. Hey, with you, I mean, you mentioned you grew up on Long Island and you're an Eagles fan. A lot of, Northeast is a lot of pro sports. So we talk about like going to Florida and the culture around college football and basketball. What's been the coolest sporting event you've been able to go to there at Florida? What's your number one?
I mean, football's cool, but I would have to say it's easily the women's gymnastics meets. They are unbelievable to watch.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like amazing. Like you go there and they're like 17-time All-American, and like they literally get an All-American on all the events that they like compete in. It's like amazing.
Yeah, I've heard SEC gymnastics is like unlike anything else.
No, it's amazing. It's so fun to watch too, like the music, and like I'm really into like I wish I played a sport that like you can wear makeup all the time. So I'm so always jealous of them, but it's really fun to watch and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little counterintuitive considering you wear a helmet, but I mean, it is what it is at this point. You chose what you chose.
Well, Tom, you got anything else?
Yeah, I did want to ask before you go. February, North Carolina at Maryland and against Stony Brook, 3 straight weeks. When you hear that, what do you think?
Excites me. I cannot wait to compete.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, it's going to be a really fun stretch, especially early on. You guys are right there in the national spotlight to begin with. Good luck. Stay healthy, and we'll catch up sometime here down the road.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Stay warm down there.
I will.
So a big thanks to Sam and Sarah for joining us. Now we turn our attention to this weekend. We got men's college lacrosse, really our full-ish weekend of games. What game are you watching?
I think it might be a little obvious, but for mine, it's High Point at Maryland.
It's
of course, we know High Point always poised to throw off an upset with the schedule they had. They didn't do it last year, so I feel like maybe this year could be an opportunity for them to do that going into Maryland. And Maryland, I think, is so intriguing because it's the post-Jared Bernhardt era. You got Logan Wisnauskas wearing the number 1. You have Jonathan Donville, who hasn't played lacrosse in a couple of years, coming in and seeing what he's got in store. So I think Maryland's really intriguing. They've won 28 straight season openers. We'll see if they can do it against Asher Nolting and High Point. Asher, of course, a guy that always is stop and watch television no matter what and who he's playing. So High Point could be an opportunity for them to get a big marquee victory on opening weekend.
And a big chance, I think, even if they don't win, to make a statement to everybody like, hey, we're here. They were my surprise, not in the top 20 for Inside Lacrosse's media poll.
That game, noon on Big Ten Network Plus. So do your best when watching that.
Check it out. For me, I'm going to stay in the Big Ten, but we're going to go with a different Big Ten SoCon matchup. We got Hopkins and Jacksonville.
Ooh,
really interested.
Spicy.
Really interested to see this game. I'm not just watching this because I'm getting ready for Hopkins and Towson here on LSN a week from this Friday. Kick off our season here on Lax Sports Network. That'll be a terrific game. We finally get the Hopkins-Towson rivalry back after a couple of years. But I'm really intrigued to see this Hopkins team because last year was the first year under Peter Milliman as their head coach, and it obviously was a different year. They got less of a fall maybe than anybody else in the Big Ten with some different restrictions on campus. So now that they've had really a full fall and they get a normal-ish preseason, I'm interested to see what this program looks like under Peter Milliman. I think this will be our first real chance to get an opportunity to see what they have because, look, they do have talent. They contended with Maryland in the Big Ten tournament last year. And as it has been the case the last couple of years, they kind of figured it out toward the end. Now can they transition that and they've got a guy in Joey Epstein. He can be the guy. So can they transition that into some success early in the season? I think early in the season is going to be really important for this Hopkins team to buy in, kind of set the culture of what Peter Milliman wants to do there. So this game against Jacksonville, our first opportunity to see that. And then they got Towson a week from Friday, which will be a great matchup. Charles Street rivalry situation continuing. Also for Jacksonville, John Galloway, I'm really interested to see what they have. And because can they contend with Richmond and High Point?
Well, I think that's the thing with Jacksonville. I think that's the intrigue is like they maybe feel a little short-sighted. A lot of talk about High Point, a lot of talk about Richmond coming into this season. Not many people are talking about Jacksonville, who are always contending at the end. They always have played a really tough schedule out of conference. So it would be interesting what they're going to look like as well. That's what I'm intrigued by.
And talk about a cool place for John Galloway to go, a place where he has played his rival Hopkins when he was goalie at Syracuse, takes his new team now out to Homewood, see what we got.
There's some energy there. There's some feelings that come up, I'm sure.
For sure.
He might not admit it, but I bet he feels a certain way.
There at Homewood.
He feels a certain way for sure.
Yeah, so I'll keep my eye on that one coming up here on Saturday.
All right, well, there's a good slate of games, so go out and check them out, and then things really start to pick up next weekend too. So we'll have a more detailed preview, of course, when that rolls around. But I mean, we've got slates, we've got games, and that's all good news.
We get to stop predicting and start actually talking about games, and that's when things really get good. But that's all the time we have for this week. For Tom, I'm Travis. We'll see you right back here next week.